In a small town where the streets were calm and the houses lined up neatly, there lived an old man named James. James was not like the others who rushed around every day. He moved slowly, carefully, with a cane to help him walk. His hair was gray, his face lined with years of life and many stories. James liked peace and quiet. He spent most of his days in his small garden, planting flowers and vegetables, or sitting by the window reading old newspapers. No one in town really knew much about James. He kept to himself and did not talk much with neighbors. Some people thought he was just a quiet old man. But James had a past that very few knew about, a past full of courage, challenges, and sacrifices. He had once been a man who protected many people and helped keep the country safe, but those days were far behind him now. Across the street from James's house lived Officer Tom. Tom was a police officer who took his job seriously. He walked the streets, keeping an eye on things and making sure everyone followed the rules. But Tom had his own way of seeing the world. Sometimes, he judged people quickly without really knowing them, especially if they looked different from him. Tom was proud of his job. He believed he was keeping the town safe, but his attitude made some people feel scared or angry. They felt he did not trust them, especially the people who did not look like him. Tom did not know how much his actions affected the people around him. One morning, James was sitting in his favorite chair by the window, watching the sun rise. The soft light came through the glass, warming the room. Outside, the birds were singing, and the air smelled fresh. James smiled quietly to himself. It was a simple moment, but for him, it was a moment of calm and happiness. Later, James decided to take a walk to the park nearby. It was not far from his house, but walking even a few steps took effort. His cane helped him balance, and he moved slowly, enjoying the gentle breeze. He liked to watch children play and sometimes talk to the old trees that had stood there for many years. As James walked, he thought about his life. He remembered his younger days working hard, facing dangers, and helping many people. Those memories were like old friends. Sometimes, they made him feel proud. Other times, they made him tired. But now, he just wanted peace. At the same time, Officer Tom was on his patrol. He walked the same streets every day, looking for anything that seemed unusual. When he saw James moving slowly with his cane, Tom felt a strange feeling inside. He did not know why, but he felt suspicious. Tom had seen many things during his years as an officer. Some of those things made him cautious, but sometimes his caution turned into unfair judgment. He thought, why is this man out here alone? What is he doing? Without stopping to think, Tom started walking toward James. James noticed Tom coming and stopped. He did not want any trouble. "Good morning, officer," James said politely. Tom looked at James closely. "What are you doing out here, old man?" he asked sharply. His voice was not kind. James was surprised. He had never been treated this way by a police officer before. "I'm just taking a walk, sir," James replied softly. "I like to come to the park." Tom frowned. He did not believe James. "Why don't you live somewhere with people to watch you? Why are you out here alone?" James felt a little hurt by the questions. "I live by myself," he said quietly. "I'm fine." Tom's eyes narrowed. He thought James was hiding something. His mind was filled with old fears and doubts, and he didn't stop to ask questions calmly. Instead, he reached out to take James's arm. James tried to pull away, surprised by the rough touch. "Please, I'm not causing any trouble, James said, his voice shaking. But Tom did not listen. The officer's grip was too strong, and James lost his balance. He fell to the ground, feeling a sharp pain in his ribs. He gasped and tried to get up, but the pain stopped him. Tom looked down, his face showing anger and confusion. "You should tell me the truth," he said. "I'm only doing my job." James looked up at Tom, hurt and surprised. "I'm telling the truth," he said. "Please, be gentle." Nearby, a few people had started to watch. Some whispered to each other, shocked by what they saw. James was an old man, not a threat. But Tom did not stop. After a moment, Tom finally released his grip. James stayed on the ground, breathing hard and feeling the pain grow. His ribs were hurt, and he was afraid to move too much. One of the neighbors, a young woman named Lisa, quickly came forward. "Is he okay?" she asked, helping James to sit up. James nodded slowly but didn't say much. He was too surprised and hurt by what had happened. Tom looked around, feeling a little embarrassed. Some of the neighbors were watching with worried eyes. "I'm just doing my job," he said again, trying to sound firm. But inside, Tom felt a small doubt. Was he really doing the right thing? Had he judged James too quickly? He did not want to admit it, but something in the way James looked calm but hurt made him think twice. James slowly stood up, leaning heavily on his cane. "I will be okay," he said quietly. "Thank you, Lisa." Tom watched as James walked away slowly toward his house. For the first time, Tom felt unsure about what he had done. The old man had not been dangerous. He was just an old man taking a walk. That night, James sat by his window again. The pain in his ribs was strong, but his heart was heavier. He thought about how quick people could be to judge others without knowing their story. He thought about the long life he had lived full of challenges and kindness and how the world had changed around him. But James knew one thing: he would not let anger or sadness win. He would keep living quietly, hoping that someday, people like Tom would learn to see the good in others. The next morning, James woke up feeling the pain in his ribs more than before. It was hard to breathe and move. He tried to keep calm and remind himself that this pain would pass. But deep inside, a heavy sadness grew. He had never expected a simple walk in the park would end like this. James did not want to make a big problem. He thought about going to the hospital but worried about what people might say. "I don't want trouble," he told himself quietly. So, he stayed at home and rested, hoping the pain would get better soon. Meanwhile, Officer Tom began his day feeling different. The face of the old man, James, stayed in his mind. Tom told himself he was only doing his job. But something about James's calm face when he was hurt made Tom uncomfortable. For the first time, Tom wondered if he had been too quick to judge. The small town started talking about what happened the day before. Some people said Tom was right to be careful. Others felt sad and angry that James, an old man, was treated roughly. The story moved fast, like a quiet wind turning into a small storm. Lisa, the young woman who helped James, could not stop thinking about the incident. She remembered how gentle and kind James had been when she first met him in the neighborhood. "He's not someone who would cause trouble," Lisa told her friends. Why did the officer treat him that way? One afternoon, James's neighbor, Mr. Brown, came to check on him. Mr. Brown was a kind man who lived next door. "How are you feeling, James?" he asked, concern in his voice. James smiled weakly. My ribs hurt a lot, but I'll be okay, he said. Mr. Brown sat down beside him. You should go to the doctor, he said softly. You need to take care of yourself. James shook his head gently. I will, soon. But I don't want to make this worse. People already think bad things. Mr. Brown nodded slowly. Sometimes people judge too fast. But you are strong, James. And you deserve respect. James looked at Mr. Brown and felt a small hope grow inside. Maybe people could understand him if he shared his story. That evening, James sat by the window again, staring at the park across the street. He remembered the many years he had worked quietly, helping people in ways no one knew. In his younger days, James was part of a special team. He helped solve difficult problems and protect many lives. But now, all that seemed so far away. James wished he could tell others about his past, but he knew it would sound like a story from a different world, a world that didn't seem to fit in the quiet town where he lived. Still, James believed that if people knew the truth, they might see him differently. Maybe even Officer Tom would understand. On the other side of town, Officer Tom was in the police station, reviewing his report. His partner, Officer Mike, noticed Tom's silence. You okay? Mike asked. Tom shook his head slowly. I don't know. That old man yesterday. I think I made a mistake. Mike raised his eyebrows. What do you mean? I thought he was a threat. I judged him too fast. But he wasn't. He was hurt, and he didn't fight back. I didn't see who he really was. Mike looked surprised. Do you even know who he is? Tom shook his head. No, I don't. But I want to find out. Tom's words showed a side of him that many didn't know. Deep inside, he wanted to make things right. He just didn't know how. The next day, Maria, a young reporter from the local newspaper, heard about the incident between James and Tom. She was curious about the old man who had been treated roughly by a police officer. Maria believed every story had two sides, and she wanted to learn more. Maria knocked gently on James's door. When James opened it, she smiled kindly. Hello, Mr. James. I'm Maria, from the town paper. May I come in? James hesitated but then stepped aside. Please, come in. They sat in the living room, sunlight falling softly on the old wooden floor. Maria began to ask questions, careful not to upset James. She wanted to understand who he was and what had happened. James looked at her with tired eyes. I don't have much to say, he began slowly. I was just taking a walk. I didn't expect anyone to treat me like that. Maria nodded. I understand. But people are interested in your story. They want to know more about you. James sighed and thought for a moment. Then, he said quietly, long ago, I worked for a special agency. I helped keep people safe from danger. I traveled to many places and solved problems that were very difficult. But those days are gone now. Maria's eyes widened. That sounds amazing, Mr. James. Why didn't you tell anyone before? James smiled sadly. Because the past is behind me. I wanted to live quietly, without causing trouble. But maybe it is time for people to know the truth. Maria promised to write the story carefully and respectfully. She wanted to show the town that James was more than what they saw on the street. As Maria left, James felt a little lighter. For the first time in a long time, he believed that maybe, just maybe, things could change. At the same time, Officer Tom was reading the newspaper in the station. A small headline caught his eye: "Local elderly man, a former agent, shares his story." Tom's hands shook a little as he read about James's past, a man who had served his country with honor and courage. Tom sat back in his chair, thinking about everything again. He knew that he had to face his own feelings and learn to see people differently. James's pain was still there, but a new hope was growing, the hope that understanding could heal old wounds and bring people together. The news about James and what had happened with Officer Tom spread quickly throughout the town. People talked about it everywhere, in the small grocery store, the bakery, and even at the bus stop. Some people were upset, while others were confused. Most had never known who James really was before. At the coffee shop, a group of neighbors gathered, sipping their drinks and sharing their thoughts. "I don't think it was right to treat James that way," said Mrs. Green, a kind woman who lived down the street. "He's an old man. He didn't deserve that." "But he was out late in the park," argued Mr. Smith. "Maybe the officer was just being careful. We have to keep the town safe." Lisa, the young woman who helped James, spoke quietly but firmly. "James is gentle. I see him every day. He doesn't cause trouble. I think the officer judged him unfairly." The conversation went on, some people agreeing and others disagreeing. But one thing was clear: the town was divided. At James's house, the old man sat quietly in his chair, listening to the distant voices outside. He could feel the pain in his ribs, but his heart felt heavier because of the stories people were saying about him. For years, James had lived quietly, hoping to avoid attention. Now, the attention was not what he wanted, it was mixed with judgment and fear. His phone rang. It was Maria, the reporter. "James," she said kindly, "I want to help you tell your story the right way. People need to understand who you really are." James sighed. "I'm not sure if they will listen," he said softly. Maria smiled gently. "They will if they hear from you. Sometimes, people only understand when they see the whole picture." James thought about it. Maybe telling his story could help. Maybe it could change how people saw him and others like him. Meanwhile, Officer Tom felt the weight of the town's eyes on him. Some neighbors were angry at him, others were confused about what to think. Tom's co-workers noticed he was quieter than usual. One evening, Tom met with his captain. "Sir," Tom said, "I want to talk about what happened with James." The captain nodded. "I heard. It's a difficult situation. But you need to remember that judging people too fast can hurt everyone." Tom looked down. "I want to do better. I want to understand more." The captain smiled slightly. "That's a good start." Back in the neighborhood, children played near the park where James often walked. Some of the kids had heard the stories but didn't understand everything. One little boy, David, watched James carefully. He liked the way James smiled and waved when they passed by. "Mom, why did the policeman push Mr. James?" David asked his mother one day. His mother looked thoughtful. "Sometimes, people are afraid of things they don't understand. But we should always be kind and listen." David nodded, looking over at James's house. He hoped Mr. James would be okay. James decided to visit the local community center. He wanted to talk with the people who lived in the town, to share a little of his story and maybe listen to theirs. The room was small but warm. A group of neighbors had gathered, curious about James. He stood slowly, using his cane for support. "Thank you for coming," he said softly. I know some of you have heard about what happened to me. I want to say this, I am not here to ask for anger or blame. I want to ask for understanding. James took a deep breath and began to tell a few stories from his past about the work he had done, the people he helped, and the lessons he learned. The room was quiet. Some people looked surprised, others thoughtful. For many, it was the first time they saw James as more than just the old man on the street. After his talk, Lisa approached James. "Thank you for sharing, James. I think people will start to see you in a new way." James smiled gently. "I hope so, Lisa. It's important we see each other as people with stories, struggles, and dreams." At the same time, Officer Tom listened to a recording of James's talk. He felt a strange feeling inside, a mix of respect and regret. Days passed, and the town slowly began to change. Some neighbors reached out to James, inviting him for tea or to share a meal. Others spoke more kindly about him in the streets. At the police station, Tom made a decision. He wanted to learn more about James, not just from stories, but from James himself. One afternoon, Tom walked slowly to James's house. His heart was pounding. He wasn't sure how James would react. James opened the door. "Officer Tom," he said calmly. "What brings you here?" Tom swallowed and said, "I want to apologize for how I treated you. And I want to learn from you." James looked at Tom with gentle eyes. "Thank you for saying that. It's never too late to change." That evening, as the sun set, James and Tom sat on the porch together. The pain in James's ribs was still there, but a new feeling had begun to grow, a feeling of hope. The town was still quiet, but its heart was starting to beat a little stronger. Because sometimes, it takes only one story told with courage and kindness to begin to heal a whole community. After their meeting on the porch, James and Officer Tom began to talk more often. At first, the conversations were quiet and careful, but with time, they grew warmer. Tom wanted to understand James better, not just the old man who walked slowly with a cane, but the person behind the stories and the calm eyes. One morning, Tom brought a cup of coffee to James's house. James smiled as he took it. "Thank you, Tom. It's kind of you." Tom sat down and looked at James thoughtfully. "I want to know more about your past," he said. "You said you worked for a special agency. What kind of work was it?" James took a deep breath. It was not easy to talk about the past, but he felt ready. "I was part of a team that helped solve very difficult problems," he began. "We worked quietly, often in the shadows. Sometimes, we traveled to dangerous places. Our goal was to protect people and stop bad things from happening." Tom listened carefully, his eyes wide with respect. "That sounds very important. Why didn't you tell anyone before?" James smiled sadly. "Because I wanted to live a peaceful life after all those years. The work was hard and sometimes lonely. I thought people wouldn't understand." Tom nodded slowly. "I understand now. I was wrong to judge you. I should have asked first." James looked at Tom and said, "Many people make quick decisions based on fear or misunderstanding. But it's never too late to learn and change." That afternoon, Tom decided to visit the local library. He wanted to learn more about James's past and the work he did. The librarian, Mrs. Clark, was happy to help. She was a hero in her time, Mrs. Clark said, flipping through old books and newspapers. He was part of a group that helped catch some of the country's most dangerous criminals. Quiet, smart, and brave. Not many people knew his name because the work was secret. Tom felt a new respect for James. The man he had once thought was just an old stranger was actually a hero. This changed how Tom saw not only James but also the people around him. Back in the town, Maria, the reporter, was finishing her story about James. She wanted to show the town who James really was, a man full of courage, kindness, and strength. Maria visited James again to ask more questions. This time, James shared stories of hope and justice, of how people can make a difference, even when the world seems dark. "Your story is powerful," Maria said. "It will help people see things differently." James nodded. "I hope so. But I want people to remember one thing: everyone deserves respect. No matter their age, color, or past." Meanwhile, news of James's story reached the police chief. The chief called Tom to his office. "Tom," the chief said, "I heard about James's past. I want you to work with him to help the community. We need more understanding between the police and the people." Tom felt proud and nervous. "Yes, sir. I will do my best." This was the beginning of a new chapter for both Tom and James. One afternoon, James received an invitation to speak at the local school. The principal wanted him to share his story with the students. James agreed, hoping to teach the younger generation about courage and kindness. At the school, children sat quietly as James spoke. He told them about his work, but also about the importance of respect and understanding. "Never judge someone by their appearance," James told the children. "Get to know their story. You might find a hero where you least expect it." The children listened carefully. Some asked questions, and James answered with gentle smiles. After the talk, a little girl named Emma came up to James. "Thank you for sharing," she said. "I will remember what you said." James felt warmth in his heart. Maybe his story could change the future, one young mind at a time. As the weeks passed, James and Tom worked together to build trust in the community. They organized meetings where people could talk openly about their feelings and experiences. Slowly, walls of fear and misunderstanding began to break down. One evening, Tom walked with James through the park. The sun was setting, painting the sky in soft colors. "James," Tom said, "thank you for helping me see things differently. I want to be better not just as an officer but as a person." James smiled. "That is the first step, Tom. Change begins with understanding." They paused near a bench, watching children play. The town was not perfect, but it was healing. That night, James sat by his window once more. His ribs still hurt, but his spirit was stronger. He thought about the journey he had taken from quiet loneliness to a new connection with his town. He knew there would still be challenges ahead. People don't change overnight. But he also knew that hope could grow like the flowers in his garden with patience, care, and love. James whispered softly to himself, "We all have stories. And sometimes, sharing them is the best way to heal." Outside, the night was calm. But inside James, a new light was shining, a light of understanding, respect, and hope. The days grew warmer, and the small town began to feel a little lighter. After the talks and meetings led by James and Officer Tom, something was changing. People were starting to listen to one another more, and many were willing to set aside old fears. James was surprised by the new friendships forming around him. Neighbors he had never spoken to before stopped by to say hello or share a cup of tea. Sometimes, children came to his garden, curious about the plants he cared for. James welcomed them all with a warm smile. One afternoon, Lisa knocked on James's door. "James, some people from the community want to thank you," she said. "They're organizing a small gathering at the park. Would you like to come?" James felt a mix of emotions. He was shy but also happy to be included. "I'd like that," he said quietly. That evening, the park was filled with neighbors of all ages. Tables were set with food, and soft music played in the background. James sat near the center, watching as people laughed and talked together. Officer Tom arrived too, looking a little nervous but hopeful. He walked up to James and offered a handshake. "It's good to see you here." James shook his hand. "It's good to be here." Tom looked around the gathering and said, "I'm glad we're doing this. It feels like the town is healing." James nodded. "Healing takes time, but it's possible when people come together." The event was simple, but for many, it was special. People who had once kept their distance now shared stories and smiles. The town's walls of suspicion were slowly breaking down. As the night grew darker, James and Tom sat together on a bench. The stars twinkled above, and a gentle breeze moved the leaves. "James," Tom said, "I never imagined I would learn so much from someone like you. You've taught me patience and understanding." James smiled. "And you've shown me the power of admitting when we are wrong. That takes courage." Tom looked thoughtful. "I want to be a better officer. I want to help others see the good in people, not judge them by fear." James nodded. "That is the right path." The next morning, James received a letter. It was from the town's mayor. The letter thanked James for his efforts in bringing the community together and invited him to speak at the next town meeting. James was surprised and honored. He knew this was an important chance to share a message of peace and respect with everyone. At the town hall, the room was full. People from all walks of life had gathered, curious to hear what James would say. He stood at the podium, his hands resting lightly on the wood. He looked at the faces in the crowd, some familiar, some new. "Thank you for coming," James began. "I am grateful for this opportunity to speak. Our town is made up of many stories, many people with different lives. Sometimes, we forget to listen to each other. We make quick judgments and miss the chance to understand." James paused, his voice steady but gentle. "I have lived a long life, and I have seen many things. I know what it means to face fear and danger. But I also know that the greatest strength is kindness." The room was silent. People were thinking about James's words. He continued, "We must build bridges, not walls. We must see each other as neighbors, friends, and family. Only then can we make our town a better place for everyone." When James finished, the crowd stood and applauded. The applause was warm and sincere. James felt a deep sense of peace. After the meeting, Tom approached James. "Your words were powerful. I'm proud to stand with you." James smiled. "We all have a role to play." Tom nodded. "I want to help create training for officers about respect and understanding. I want this town to be safe and welcoming." James's eyes brightened. "That is wonderful. Change begins with education and care." In the weeks that followed, the community grew stronger. Workshops and events were organized to teach respect, history, and the importance of listening. The police department worked closely with the town to build trust. James still felt the pain in his ribs, but he no longer felt alone. He was part of something bigger, a community that was learning to heal and grow. One morning, as James watered his garden, children gathered around him. They asked questions about the plants and the stories of the past. James laughed softly and shared small lessons about patience and care. The children listened closely, their eyes wide with wonder. Lisa came by and said, "James, you've given this town a gift." James looked around and nodded. "The gift is for all of us." One afternoon, James and Tom sat on the porch, watching the sunset. The sky was painted with colors of orange and pink. "James," Tom said, "I want to thank you. You helped me see the world differently." James smiled. "And you helped me believe that people can change." Tom looked hopeful. "Together, we can help this town be a place where everyone feels safe and respected." James reached out and shook Tom's hand warmly. As the sun disappeared behind the hills, the two men sat quietly, knowing that their journey was just beginning but that, together, they could make a difference. The weeks turned into months, and the small town continued to change slowly but surely. James's pain had not completely disappeared, but his spirit felt lighter than before. The once cold distance between neighbors was now filled with smiles and greetings. James and Officer Tom had become friends, working together to build trust between the police and the community. Their meetings, talks, and efforts were creating a new path, a path of respect and understanding. But change was not always easy. One sunny afternoon, the town's peace was tested. A young man named Daniel, who had recently moved to the town, was walking home from work. He was nervous because he did not yet feel comfortable in this new place. As he passed by a busy street, a police officer stopped him. "Where are you going?" the officer asked, his voice firm. Daniel's heart raced. He knew some people in the town didn't trust strangers, but he had done nothing wrong. "I'm just walking home," he said quietly. The officer looked Daniel up and down and asked for his ID. Daniel handed it over, feeling afraid. At that moment, Officer Tom arrived. He saw the tension and stepped forward. "Is there a problem here?" Tom asked calmly. The first officer explained. "We're just being careful. It's a new face in the neighborhood." Tom looked at Daniel kindly. "I'm sorry if you felt uncomfortable. We want everyone to feel safe here." Daniel nodded, grateful for Tom's words. "Thank you." Tom turned to the other officer and said firmly, "We need to treat everyone with respect. We can't judge people by how they look." The first officer nodded, a little embarrassed. This small event spread quickly. Some people in town saw it as proof that change was happening. Others still held on to old fears. James heard about the incident and felt proud of Tom. But he also worried. "Old habits are hard to break," he told Lisa. "We must keep working." Lisa smiled. "You're right, James. But this is a good step." That evening, James and Tom met at the community center for a special meeting. The room was full of people, neighbors, officers, and new residents like Daniel. James spoke first. "Today showed us that trust is fragile but possible. We must listen, be patient, and remember that behind every face is a person with hopes and fears." Tom added, "We all make mistakes. What matters is how we learn from them and move forward." The crowd applauded softly. As the meeting ended, Maria, the reporter, approached James. "Your story and your work with Tom have inspired many. I'm writing a follow-up to show how the town is growing." James nodded. "Thank you, Maria. I hope people will see that kindness can change the world." One afternoon, James received a phone call from a familiar voice. It was an old friend from his past agency. "We heard about what you're doing," the friend said. "You've made a real difference." James smiled. It's not easy, but it's worth it. The friend continued, if you ever want to share more stories, we are here to help. James felt a warmth inside. Maybe his past could help the future after all. Back in town, Tom was busy organizing new training sessions for the police officers. He invited James to speak, hoping his stories would teach respect and courage. During one training, James stood before the officers and said, "Our job is to protect everyone, without fear or hate. We must see people as human beings first." The officers listened quietly, some nodding in agreement. Outside the training room, Tom and James talked about the road ahead. "There will be challenges," James said. "But every step we take matters." Tom smiled. "With your help, I believe we can make a real difference." James nodded. "Together, we are stronger." One evening, as the town prepared for a small festival, James and Tom walked through the streets, greeting neighbors. Children ran past, laughing and playing. James looked at the faces around him and felt hope. "This town has come a long way," he said softly. Tom smiled. "And there's still more to do." James looked at Tom with a gentle smile. "That's the beauty of life, always growing, always changing." The festival began, and the town gathered to celebrate. Music filled the air, and people shared food and stories. James and Tom stood together, watching the scene. The pain in James's ribs still reminded him of the past, but the joy in the town reminded him of the future. As the stars shone brightly above, James whispered to himself, "Trust is the light that guides us all." And in that light, the town found a new beginning. The town was quiet early in the morning, just before the sun rose. James sat by his window, looking out at the soft light slowly filling the sky. His ribs still ached from the injury, but his heart felt peaceful. Over the past months, so much had changed. The town was no longer the place of fear and division it once was. People greeted each other with smiles, strangers became friends, and trust began to grow where there had been walls. James thought about his journey from a quiet, lonely man to someone who had helped his community find hope and understanding. He never imagined his story would touch so many lives. That day, James was invited to the town hall for a special event. The mayor wanted to honor him for the work he had done to bring the town together. When James arrived, the room was full of familiar faces: neighbors, friends, children, and even the police officers. The mayor stepped forward with a warm smile. "James," the mayor began, "your courage, kindness, and wisdom have changed our town. You showed us the power of respect and understanding. Today, we want to thank you." James felt a warmth spread through his chest. He stood slowly, leaning on his cane. "Thank you," he said softly. "But this is not my achievement alone. It belongs to everyone who chose to listen and change. We all have a part to play in making our world better." The room filled with applause. James looked around, seeing hope shining in the eyes of those who had once been strangers. After the ceremony, James and Officer Tom stepped outside. The sun was shining brightly, and a gentle breeze made the leaves dance. "James," Tom said, "I'm proud of what we've done together. I've learned so much from you." James smiled. "And I've learned from you, Tom. Change is possible when we open our hearts." Tom nodded. "I want to keep working for this town to build bridges and protect its people." James placed a hand on Tom's shoulder. "You will do well. Remember, kindness is the strongest shield." That evening, James sat with Lisa and a group of children in his garden. They listened as he told stories not only of the past but also of dreams for the future. One little boy asked, "James, how can we help make the world better?" James looked at the children, his eyes full of hope. "By being kind, by listening, and by standing up for what is right. Every small act of kindness makes a difference." The children smiled and promised to try. Days passed, and the town continued to grow closer. James felt a deep sense of belonging. The pain in his ribs was still there, but it no longer defined him. One afternoon, as James walked slowly through the park with his cane, he saw people sitting on benches, talking, laughing, and enjoying the day. A young woman approached him and said, "Thank you, James. You showed us that respect can change everything." James smiled gently. "Thank you for believing." Later, James received a letter from his old friends at the agency. They told him that his story had inspired many people across the country. They asked if he would share more lessons about courage and kindness. James thought for a moment. He realized his past, once hidden, could help build a better future. He wrote back with a promise to share his story not for fame, but to inspire hope. One evening, James sat quietly by the fireplace. He thought about the journey, the pain, the healing, the friendships, and the new beginnings. He knew life would always bring challenges. But he also knew that with kindness and understanding, any challenge could be faced. As he closed his eyes, James whispered softly, "We all have the power to change the world. One story, one smile, one act of kindness at a time." Outside, the stars shone brightly, lighting the town that had found a new beginning, a town where respect and hope had taken root. And in the heart of that town, James smiled, knowing that his story was not just his own but a light for many.